So, have you missed me? I realize Aston Villa has already held its end-of-season awards gala, and judging by the photos and videos sent to me by Robin and Susie Elshout, thanks for those by the way, it did seem like maybe one or two of those players would have rather been anywhere else, and there is a question as to whether or not that should be occurring at all before the season is officially over. So I thought maybe I'd do my own awards gala here in the parlor. Presented by 24/7 Services, it's the Holy Trinity show's best and worst of the 2024-2025 season. Welcome. I'm Pete, your massacre of ceremonies. It's always fun to look back at a season and pick out the very best moments, relive those highlights and good feelings. It's also equally important to look back on some of the stinkers, let's call them. In fact, we should start with the worst moments of this past season. This one came in the midst of a very damaging run in our season. 8 winless from the end of October to the start of December, and this also ended our unbeaten run in the Champions League phase. And of course, it had to happen to Tyrone Mings. I'm talking about the game at Club Brugge and the bizarre handball incident that I've never seen before in my life. And for once, Emi Martinez could not bail out his teammate and make the penalty save. Worst moment number 2. Well, we still haven't gotten over it because it just happened. And we had no business even being in the game at Old Trafford in minute number 74, but by some stroke of good fortune and a little bit of help elsewhere, we were in a Champions League place at that moment. But it's always Old Trafford, it's always Manchester United, and it's usually a brutal refereeing cock-up that does us in, and this was one for the ages. You will be telling your grandchildren about that time on the final day of the season 24-25, when a young, inexperienced referee who had no business officiating a game of that magnitude with what was at stake, guessed on a decision from more than 25 yards away, thinking the goalkeeper had control when he did not. Now, had the goal stood, he didn't blow the whistle, there's no guarantee that we would have still qualified for Champions League, but with 15 minutes left, we would have been in with a shout. It's a moment that will haunt Thomas Bramall for the rest of his career, and it's also the moment that ended everyone associated with Aston Villa earning their Champions League qualification bonus. But the number one worst moment of this past season occurred under the arch at Wembley. Yes, qualifying for Champions League is really important because it gives you some financial wiggle room. It allows you to attract the best players with the idea of improving your squad so that you can do the point of the exercise, and that's win trophies. And Aston Villa hasn't collected a lot of silverware of late. In fact, the only thing we're collecting in our trophy cabinet is dust. Crystal Palace, like Manchester United, has suddenly become our bogey team. Oliver Glasner has figured out Unai Emery. And for the 4th time in 5 games, Palace didn't just beat Villa, they made it look easy. They knocked us out of both cup competitions this season, and we haven't beaten them since Oliver Glasner took charge. And it terrifies me that they are also in the Europa League this season. At least it terrifies me for now. Let's see if all those players and the manager are kept together this summer. Moving on to another of the worst categories, and that's the worst goals conceded this past season. And this is a combination of aesthetics and also the mistakes that led to those goals, but of course the implications as well. And this was a goal we conceded at Portman Road, home of newly promoted Ipswich, a team we were incapable of beating this year and a team that is now straight back down in the championship. With Villa leading by 2-1 and with just 18 minutes left, We got hit on the counter. It wasn't the first time, and it wouldn't be the last. But for our chiseled Brazilian Diego Carlos, it literally looked like he was running in quicksand. He was that slow, laborious, and casual. Obviously, there was an issue between Carlos and Emery, who tried to unload him in the summer. Maybe it stemmed back to the game at RB Leipzig in preseason, maybe before that. But it was just another example that Diego Carlos did not look like he wanted to be with us. And so Liam Delap's second goal cost us 2 precious points to go along with the 2 points we dropped against the Tractor Boys at home. The second stinker in our goals conceded category is one that I've referenced 100 times already this season, and it came at the end of a grueling 3-game week that started with a brilliant 3-1 win at Craven Cottage over Fulham, followed by a very comprehensive and solid 2-0 win at home over Bologna, which kept the Champions League momentum rolling. All that stood in the way of a sensational 3-win week was a visit by Bournemouth to Villa Park, and we were 6 minutes into stoppage time away from achieving it. It's not just the goal, which came from a set piece, it was all the little actions leading up to the foul and the free kick that were disturbing because it was so casual. I know Boubacar Kamara was just back off of injury, Ross Barkley involved, but there were so many moments that we could have prevented the problems from escalating, and conceding that many goals in the final 15 minutes of a game and even beyond in stoppage time was a huge issue for us. And that all comes down to mentality. Evan Nielsen somehow wide open for a free header, and that goal began the damaging run of 8 winless games. Honorable mention for one of the worst goals conceded this past season came at the Etihad. Graveyard for points, like the city of Manchester itself. And when Jeremy Doku was introduced late in that second half to go up against our loanee, occasional right back Axel Dessassi, well, it wasn't optimal. So the point we were clinging on to was extinguished deep into stoppage time by a player who had never scored for Manchester City and who was playing out of position, like many of Pep's men were that day. Another very worthy candidate in this category that didn't make the top 3 was PSG's first goal at Villa Park in the Champions League quarterfinal second leg. I mean, this was the goal we needed to hold off on as long as possible, and they get it early. And again, it's a series of little mistakes that led to it. And for Emi Martinez, who seems to have worn this invisible shield throughout his career in big games, well, that shield was pierced. But the number one worst conceded goal of the season came in the French capital in the first leg of our Champions League quarterfinal with PSG. This was a game we probably had no business being in the way it was going. We were sitting deep, hoping to counter, and Morgan Rogers justified that approach by doing what he's been doing all season, coming up with the goods out of the blue. How we responded to that goal wasn't the best. We conceded not long after, and then we conceded at another bad time at the beginning stages of the second half. 2-1 down away in Paris would have been a reasonable, respectable result, giving us everything to play for at Villa Park. And then in stoppage time, it was as if the entire Villa team switched off. Maybe it was fatigue in stoppage time. I don't know. But we had Boubacar Kamara sitting deep, and he tried to gamble and slide and win the through ball. Axel Dessassi, who was a halftime sub in this game, was in the neighborhood. He was in the area without doing anything. And then a 22-year-old fullback made both Ezri Konsa and Emi Martinez look foolish. And all of a sudden, it's 3-1, and the second leg now becomes that much more complicated. I'm working on a show for the summer transfer strategy as we speak, but I wonder if Aston Villa took some inspiration from PSG, which is a great team with a superb manager. They've moved away from the older, higher profile player and focused their efforts on younger, very high potential players. And this is a model that I think clubs with great scouting networks should look at adopting. And I just wonder if Aston Villa saw what happened there and got validation that you can win big games with young players, because there's an element of bravery and precociousness that comes with youngsters. I thought about doing a worst penalty miss of the season, but Ollie Watkins would have won that by such a wide margin against Celtic. There wasn't really a point, although Marco Asensio did his utmost to be a nominee for that prize, not just once, but twice at Southampton. And then Yuri Tielemans' miss against Crystal Palace, against Henderson, who's had our number, was also pretty crucial because that might have changed the complexion of that game. Can we find a reliable Rashford-like penalty taker in this offseason? The best and most dramatic before and after renovation or rejuvenation project award goes to Die Hard Villains 24/7 Services. I've been showing you the progress on this residential property in Litchfield. Well, look at this. The client loved the company so much, they almost got 24/7 Services colors in there for their custom-built media unit. And then Heartlands Hospital in Birmingham went from this to this. Job now done. I'm extremely proud of this show's association with 24/7 Services because I know when I talk about them, they're going to deliver the goods. And I know this because you've told me so. While we're on the subject of high quality, let's now turn our attention to the top moments of the season and the best 90-minute comprehensive performances. And if we could have one complaint about Aston Villa this past season is that we just didn't have enough of these. So the top three were pretty easy to pick out, including the visit of Manchester City to Villa Park. Only Phil Foden's late goal, again happening in stoppage time, put a minor blemish on an otherwise great day, our last game before Christmas, and one that came between two difficult losses, at Nottingham Forest and then at Newcastle. Jack Grealish being kept very quiet in a starting role added to the pleasurable occasion. Number 2 in the best 90-minute performance category came recently, and it kept our Champions League charge rolling, and that's when we battered Newcastle United 4-1 at Villa Park. A very motivated Ollie Watkins scored early, and he probably could have scored more, slightly annoyed by not getting more involvement against PSG, and then a late exclamation delivered by Amadou Onana with a fantastic Ian Matson goal in between. Given our record recently against Newcastle United, this might have been one of the most satisfying 90-minute performances of the season. A worthy honorable mention in this category was our trip to Bern, Switzerland, and Villa's first Champions League game in decades. And of course, this game came in the wake of one of the worst moments of the season, and that was the tragic passing of Villa legend Gary Shaw. And boy, did we turn in a tribute to our 82 European Cup hero by battering the hosts 3-0, still flattered them, even though it was on a plastic pitch with difficult conditions, and we did ourselves proud that day. But the number one most comprehensive 90-minute performance of the season also came from Champions League when we once again defeated our 1982 adversaries Bayern Munich by 1-0. Now, we did not dominate that game by any means, but we hung around, we stayed patient, we stayed positive, we stuck to the plan, and in minute number 79, thanks to a little piece of intel from one of the tactical preparation meetings leading up to the game, John Duran scored on a wandering Manuel Neuer. The aftermath of that game helped Villa earn one of the most important aspects of their Champions League qualification, and that's respect. It really allowed us to believe again, and it quantified and justified our qualification to Europe's top competition. And those 3 points were also crucial in helping us get closer to top 8 in the league phase, which we were gunning for, and which, of course, helped us avoid a round. We did accomplish top 8. Bayern did not. The best away day of this past season, there were lots of candidates because of Champions League. Bern looked beautiful. Preston seemed like a really cool vibe at Deepdale. But man, going to Leipzig around Christmas time with all those markets, that's my jam. Now for the top goal of the season, and these particular nominees required good aesthetics, obviously, a degree of difficulty or even audacity, and then the contextual significance of the goal on a game or in a campaign, and there were many contenders, thankfully. We'll probably have to start with an honorable mention, and this could have even been the goal of the year. I'm talking about John Duran's game-winning thunder bastard at home to Everton. The Toffees' visit to Villa Park in the September sunshine did not go to plan, as we found ourselves down 2-bagel inside the first half hour, but this Villa team did have a common habit of being able to come from behind, and in minute number 76, our chaotic Colombian unleashed a pile driver that flew past Jordan Pickford for the winner. Now, it was a famous goal, and it could have been one of the top goals, but at that time, even though those 3 points were as important as any, it didn't have the same implications. You could probably say the same about his important goal at RB Leipzig in Champions League. Following the demoralizing 4-1 loss to Crystal Palace at Selhurst Park, Aston Villa went on quite a run, winning 13 games in all competitions. The January recruitment of Marco Asensio and Marcus Rashford played a huge role in that, but it also created a little bit of awkwardness for Ollie Watkins because Unai Emery was reluctant to play Rashford and Watkins together. After the difficult loss in Paris, Villa found itself at a potentially tricky test at St. Mary's against the bottom-side Saints. Marcus Rashford started that game, but in the 66th minute, it was still 0-0 when he was substituted by Ollie Watkins, who then earned a penalty 2 minutes later, and 5 minutes later latches on to an incredible inch-perfect ball by Yuri Tielemans over the top, and he somehow does something, anything, to get it past Aaron Ramsdale. An incredible moment for him, and we coasted after. But what if we didn't get that goal? And by the way, Ollie Watkins' goal at Bournemouth could have easily been top 3 as well because of the historical significance of his surpassing Gabriel Agbonlahor. But that goal wouldn't have meant as much if we didn't get the goal and the win at Southampton. Top goals number 2 and 1 both came from the same game, and Villa fans can be forgiven for checking out emotionally when Paris Saint-Germain took a 2-0 lead at Villa Park to lead the tie 5-1 on aggregate. Yuri Tielemans scored a late first-half goal via a huge deflection, which felt like a consolation goal of sorts at the time. But what happened next will be remembered for generations. You could flip goals 1 and 2 and be totally justified because both were special in their own way, and if Aston Villa could play one way for the rest of our lives, I would hope it would look like those 20 glorious minutes in the second half at Villa Park against one of the best teams in the world who we had rattled. And John McGinn's goal was a combination of both aesthetics and audacity along with significance because it was the goal that gave us that glimmer of belief. And it took some audacity to drive the ball down the field and have a go from that distance. Okay, it took a deflection, but if we are to build a John McGinn statue outside Villa Park, we need to model it after any of the poses that he had during the course of that goal. But the number 1 goal of the season came just 2 minutes later. And maybe that's why it fully deserved to be the number 1 goal of the season, because of how it made you and I feel in that moment, no matter whether you were at Villa Park or watching 7,400 miles away on television. If you're going to judge something, basing it on emotion and reaction, probably a good way to go. A beautifully crafted goal. Marcus Rashford driving by people effortlessly. And who could have imagined that in a crowded PSG penalty area that Ezri Konsa could have been so cool, collected, and clinical when the ball came his way? I will never forget what I felt and how I reacted when that goal went in. Sadly, the epic comeback fell short. Konsa would have a big chance to actually level the tie, and there were other chances as well. But it still was a wonderful moment that none of us will ever forget. I hope you enjoyed the Holy Trinity Show's season-ending awards, as the focus can now shift to transfer business this summer. And because of the Club World Cup, there's this weird little window that opens already on June 1st before pausing and then resuming again. I would assume Aston Villa, being who they are going to try to be quite proactive. So I'm working on a show for that right now, and I hope to get it done soon because I have hernia surgery on Tuesday. It's been quite a year for health. Until then, be well, enjoy the sunshine, and as always, up the mighty Villa!